Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Cassie Solomon. Cassie founded the New Group in 1997 to create a firm dedicated to helping leaders design and implement successful change. Her book, Leading Successful Change, 8 Keys to Making Change Work, co-authored with Greg Shea, was published in February of 13 by Wharton Digital Press. Her assignments focus on org design, workforce transformation, and the introduction of new technology. She's an internationally recognized expert on RACI, which is a project management tool. She's currently working on her new book, which may be out shortly if it's not out, called The Augmented Provider. And she is also, or was in a previous life, a consultant at CFAR, which is a Philly-based consulting firm that was spun out of the Wharton School of Business in 1987. Anyway, here we are. I can go on and on with your intro, but that would eat into valuable chat time here. So welcome aboard. How are you?
Thank you. Very nice to be on the podcast, Peter, and great to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's start with how the heck did you get here, right? Nobody or very few people wake up one day and say, I'm going to be an author, a consultant, an advisor, and run a consulting firm, as well as be involved in exec ed and all the other things that you've done. So how has that happened, and how do some of the parts that look like they might not be connected connect?
So I was with, a consulting firm initially, doing a lot of work in organizational change, and went out on my own. I think it's about 13 years ago now, eek. And that is, as most of those of us who are on our own will tell you, is pretty daunting to do. But I started using Greg's change model in the assignments that I was getting. And
so that's Greg Shea. That's your co-author. Yeah. Okay.
And I was really bowled over by how successful it was. And, the research that we later did, something like between 50 and 75% of change initiatives fail. So when I was really impressed with how this approach to change was working, and Greg and I have actually known each other since we were both at Yale. So I said, Greg, this thing is incredible, and you've got to write the book. And he said, well, why don't we just write the book together? So that was 2013. And I think from that.
So wait, just so I want to just pack a point there. Anytime somebody says you should write the book and they counter with, yeah, no, you should write the book, and they become co-authors, et tu, right? So,
oh my gosh.
Careful what you wish for, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This is now a marriage, with all
yes.
kind of ups and downs. And I believe me, he would say the same. So I think where we sort of found our spot in terms of our relationship as writers is that I tend to do the case writing. I'm a practitioner. I'm
sure.
there kind of, sometimes I call myself, I'm like the mechanic that slides underneath the car with the wrench. You got to change something, send me in. And so I tend to be the one who focuses more on writing the cases. And so the revised book, which was just done over the summer and published in February, was really a labor of love for me, because we took out cases that were based on secondary material in the first book and put in cases from my clients in the second book.
So I want to question something you said there. So you said, you're the mechanic. So does that mean Greg's the more academic in terms of his style?
He certainly does his share of consulting, but yes, he does a lot more teaching than I do. And when we teach together at Wharton, he sort of hands, the class over to me and says, Cassie will now teach the model, and she'll bring you cases. And
cool. So I want to touch on that because I think that dance between the two doesn't happen often enough. I call it sort of the Reese's peanut butter. You put your chocolate on my peanut butter, whatever. Normally there's this silly debate or conflict between the academic that says, I've studied this, I've modeled this, and here's all the quant and and it's a regression study, whatever. And then the practitioner goes, yes, but, when you're in the real world and, you don't have the wrench and you got to use the pliers, and, you don't always get buy-in, or it doesn't always work like that. And instead of arguing, actually, I think it's more powerful when the two of you can dance together and say, yes, here's the models, and here's why the models are valid. And by the way, models are just one way of looking at the world, and there are no models that are perfect. And here's the reality. And when you learn that way, because usually in practice, in the real world, it's a little bit of both. You have to respect the model and be fluid or agile enough to go, yeah, well, this isn't a perfect scenario. So would you
I think
comment
that's
on that?
good for us. I mean, he's classically trained, and I am too, but now I'm sort of using jazz, when I work with the model. That would be the metaphor I would use.
Got it. So was the revised version of the book the same publisher? Was that Wharton Press as well?
Yes, it's Wharton School Press. They've changed their name in the meantime.
Okay.
And it's, they're just a fantastic, wing partner to have as a publisher. There's the whole kind of, I think it's 1 million people in the Wharton community. So that's where we can kind of send the message. They feature it in their Knowledge for Wharton in the blog that goes out a couple of times a week. So it's a great relationship with them.
And you've got the new book. When is that due to be out in the universe?
That is kind of my practice is actually morphing as more of my clients for whom I do organizational change have sort of asked me to look into the future with them and say, there's a hell of a lot of change on the horizon, Cassie, let's try to figure that out together. And I actually had to go and become certified as a futurist after a couple of years of doing this.
But there's a body that certifies people in being futurists?
There is. It's a great body. It's the Institute for the Future in Palo Alto. And it was founded 60 years ago by the Rand Corporation. And they're terrific. Anyway.
So does their softball team play against the Historian Society, or I'm kidding?
No, I'm not in Palo Alto. I just kind of remote in.
No, I know.
We all do right now. So, this next book is hoping to capture the work that I've been doing the last couple of years, which is sort of helping organizations look into the future, both with their strategy and with their workforce development.
Got it. So tell us a little bit about the blend of your work. So in a typical month, and we're living in times that are not quite typical, but let's just go back to the quaint old days of, a couple of weeks ago. What's the mix in terms of how you spend your time researching, writing, serving clients? Like, what does it look like?
So it's interesting because I think there are two flavors that I've experienced with this. And the first one is really the easiest because if I'm working with a client, I'm doing things either with the model or with this futures work that can then become the story that both of us want to tell. So, for example,
both meaning you and the client.
Me and the client, that's right.
Interesting.
So one of the cases, for example, in the book, my client worked with Twitter, and that's been really fascinating. And so going to my client, Meg Haley, and saying, this is really important work. Let's write this together, and I'll put it in the next version of the book. You get into a lot of permissions issues, and is very visible like Twitter, and in the news like Twitter. There was a period there where I thought we were not going to get the approvals that we needed, but that there are a couple of cases in the book that are based on client work. So that's a fantastic synergistic relationship. You're doing the work and the work is going well, and then you're writing about the work that you just did. And I think then that's interesting for people because it's not theoretical, it's grounded in real stories. And that's sort of the first flavor. The second one, and I think this is one of the things I'd like to do next, is finding something through secondary research, something that's in the press, and then writing about it. And the example that ended up in the book is a company called IDXDR. And one of my clients, a physician named Mark Schneider, and I wrote a blog for Wharton about this company's technology, which is really groundbreaking. Then I got to know the company's founder and CEO and interviewed him for, the case. We expanded it, became a case in the book. And now he's helping me with something else that I'm doing, pulling together an alliance of AI researchers. So that wasn't even a relationship. That was just me reading something, in the press, writing about it, and then creating the relationship.
If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts. Interesting. And then using that as an example, what's the monetization component of that? So, because you develop this work, this content, and now what? How does that serve the business side? Because you're sort of a for-profit researcher, right? Embedded in your own consulting company.
Absolutely. I'm not sure that the relationship is always direct. I think it's something that can be direct. In this case, the things that I was learning as I was writing about IDXDR, and I ended up pivoting and using with a national group of banking regulators. So there's a wild switch. But they were the same learnings. I just had to put them down in a different setting with a different client.
Got it. And what are the other sort of lines of work that you do? You give me a sense of what the practice looks like, types of problems you solve, who you solve them for.
Sure. I do. I'd say there are probably three practice areas, Peter. The first one is I think of as executive change coaching. I don't
Okay.
come at executive coaching with a traditional HR lens.
Yeah.
I don't want to give you a personality assessment and then make you a
Yeah.
better person. I want to come on board when you're facing a really significant change, opportunity or threat, and you really need somebody riding shotgun that knows what they're doing. So
But that change is business change, not some sort of a personal life event change,
correct,
right? So the
correct.
change is
Yeah, business
an
change.
acquisition, product launch, change in the market, blah, 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 right? Okay.
And I tend to find myself in really wickedly complex stakeholder situations. So, give me a
Okay.
good university project that has trying to pull together 5 deans. That's one of the projects that one of my clients is working on. So executive change coaching is the first one. The second one is really supporting senior teams in imagining and designing change. And this really comes out of the orientation in the book, that you actively design a change. You don't kind of passively float into it and hope for the best. So what you do up front is really critical to the success or failure of that change initiative. And so, different kinds of problems fall under that category. Sometimes it's, oh, we've got a bad employee engagement score and we don't think our culture is good enough. So that's a change we want to make. It might be we want to introduce a whole new level of technology and digitization, and we're not ready for that.
Yep.
Come help us think that through. And really the third area is more just straight up strategic planning. It's been a real surprise because that is not my background. And yet I think having the organizational change hat really actually helps you create more powerful strategic planning processes that kind of sweep people in. And when you're done, if you do it right, you don't just have a plan that sits on the shelf. You have a plan that people have really lived themselves into.
So I want to touch on that, because there's strategic planning as a discipline. You've got folks that's what they do, right? But you're doing that, you're doing it well, and you're attributing the success there to your org change side, right? Because what is change without org change, right? And that's interesting. When you're doing those engagements, do you sort of bury the lead, or is it no? I am a domain expertise in org change that will help you develop the strategy. Because it seems a little counterintuitive. If you were in a bake-off against 2 others, and we've got strategy practitioner, and wait, she doesn't sort of fit the mold. How is that a good thing, and how is it maybe a challenge sometimes for you?
So I definitely don't bury the lead, and so far I think it's a good thing. I don't think there are any strategies around right now that don't involve a tremendous amount of organizational change.
Sure.
So you can't separate them. At the end of the day, even if you went off into a closet and made your strategy and then came out and announced it, you're going to take your organization through significant change. And how you create the plan really sets you up for success or failure. So, for example, I've got to put a proposal in next week, and they have very clear ideas. They want like 40 interviews of these stakeholders, and they want 30 interviews of these stakeholders. And I said, that's not a good idea. People are not going to be engaged in
No, wait, I want to understand. So the they is the client says, this is the way by which you will do so. And so you're saying, well, you're only doing that to try to get to this outcome, but I have a better tool or a better way to get there.
I'm saying you can have a proposal, but that's not the design you're going to get. Let me know right now if that alarms you, because I'm looking at it through my lens, and people are not going to be engaged in the end product if they just get interviewed for 30 minutes and then 7 months later there's a plan, or even 3 months later there's a plan. And so they have a very complex stakeholder situation, and they need to get people actively engaged in talking about the strategic priorities. Anyway, so there's a tremendous design element in all of the strategic planning projects.
Yeah, no, interesting.
That
so I want
the org change work.
Yeah. So I want to move for a couple of minutes as we start to wrap in a few minutes to just sort of the business side of the business, right? So you've been doing this for a while. You've got a great reputation. This isn't your first rodeo, as they say. Or I don't know who they is, but someone said that once. Where does deal flow come from? Is it referrals? Is it the marketing side, the sales side, the getting the content out there? magic happen and you wind up having the right type of engagements and the right frequency at the right price point that you like?
Well, I think, I'm definitely figuring all of this out, but having survived and thrived for 13 years, it's been a journey I've mostly figured out. I think word of mouth is certainly a large part of it. I think teaching at executive education is also very helpful. That's how I met Twitter, for example.
So that's like a free sample, right? So if you're meaning if Twitter is paying whatever Wharton to bring in a cohort of folks there, and even if you're not leading it, but you've got a 3-hour slice of whatever, that's an eye opener for them to go, yeah, we want more of that.
And that's a fantastic mechanism,
Mm-hmm.
not available to everyone, but Wharton,
Sure.
they want someone to teach organizational change. And so you're kind of starting out with both the expertise and the credibility of something like Wharton behind you. The other, I think, really is the writing. And I have a website that's devoted to racy, as you mentioned in the intro, because I'm really interested in something we've talked about, horizontal leadership, how people work across departments and break down silos. It's getting even more interesting because organizations are partnering and networks are forming. You probably have heard a lot about platform organization. That set of skills is something that I write about through that racy website. And all kinds of interesting clients have found me. Their problem is we can't get decisions made fast enough.
Sure.
People infighting across silos.
Well, we're matrix, we're confused, who owns that, or,
and,
whatever.
The tagline on that website is clarity starts here. And so when they come to me that way, it's been really refreshing because a lot of different kinds of companies have found me through that pipeline. Global manufacturer a couple of months ago, when, before we had these problems, they had suppliers in China, trade wars and distribution centers in Britain and Brexit. So before long, you're talking strategy, even if you come in the door talking about how can I get your new product development process kind of cleaned up.
Right. Not quite so simple. Exactly. Great. Well, this has been fantastic. I appreciate your time and I appreciate you sharing your story and your journey with us. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter. Great to see you.
Thanks. To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.